Since I have mentioned Paul and men like him, I will, with your permission, pass by all others to set forth Paul as the witness to my assertions, and for us to consider by his example how important a matter is the care of souls, and whether it requires slight attention and little judgment. But that we may recognize and perceive this, let us hear what Paul himself says of Paul. I say nothing of his labors, his watchings, his sufferings in hunger and thirst, in cold and nakedness, his assailants from without, his adversaries within. I pass over the living by his own hands, the gospel without charge, the being a spectacle to both angels and men, set in the midst between God and men to champion his cause and to unite them to him and make them his own peculiar people, besides those things that are without. For who could worthily detail these matters, the daily pressure, the individual solicitude, the care of all the churches, the universal sympathy and brotherly love? Did anyone stumble? Paul also was weak. Did another suffer scandal? It was Paul who was on fire. What of the laboriousness of his teaching, the manifold character of his ministry, his loving kindness, and on the other hand, his strictness, and the combination and blending of the two in such wise that his gentleness should not enervate, nor his severity exasperate. He gives laws for slaves and masters, rulers and ruled, husbands and wives, parents and children, marriage and celibacy, self-discipline and indulgence, wisdom and ignorance, circumcision and uncircumcision, Christ and the world, the flesh and the spirit. On behalf of some, he gives thanks. Others he upbraids. Some he names his joy and crown. Others he charges with folly. Some who hold a straight course he accompanies, sharing in their zeal. Others he checks who are going wrong. At one time, he excommunicates. At another, he confirms his love. At one time, he grieves. At another, rejoices. At one time, he feeds with milk. At another, he handles mysteries. At one time, he condescends. At another, he raises to his own level. At one time, he threatens a rod. At another, he offers the spirit of meekness. At one time, he is haughty toward the lofty. At another, lowly toward the lowly. Now, he is the least of the apostles. Now, he offers a proof of Christ speaking in him. Now, he longs for departure and is being poured forth as a libation. Now, he thinks it is more necessary for their sakes to abide in the flesh. For he seeks not his own interest, but those of his children, whom he has begotten in Christ by the gospel. This is the aim of all his spiritual authority, in everything to neglect his own in comparison with the advantage of others. He glories in his infirmities and distresses. He takes pleasure in the dying of Jesus as if it were a kind of ornament. He is lofty in carnal things. He rejoices in things spiritual. He is not rude in knowledge and claims to see in a mirror darkly. He is bold in spirit and buffets his body, throwing it as an antagonist. What is the lesson and instruction he would thus impress upon us? Not to be proud of earthly things or puffed up by knowledge or excite the flesh against the spirit. He fights for all, prays for all, is jealous for all, is kindled on behalf of all, whether without law or under the law, a preacher of the Gentiles, a patron of the Jews. He even was exceedingly bold on behalf of his brethren, according to the flesh, if I may myself be bold enough to say so, in his loving prayer, that they might in his stead be brought to Christ. What magnanimity, what fervor of spirit. He imitates Christ, who became a curse for us, who took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses, or, to use more measured terms, he is ready, next to Christ, to suffer anything, even as one of the ungodly, for them, if only they be saved. Why should I enter into detail? He lived not to himself, but to Christ and his preaching. He crucified the world to himself, and being crucified to the world and the things which are seen, he thought all things little and too small to be desired. Why need I speak of the things of ancient days? Who can test himself by the rules and standards which Paul laid down for bishops and presbyters, that they are to be temperate, sober-minded, not given to wine, no strikers, apt to teach, blameless in all things, and beyond the reach of the wicked, without finding considerable deflection from the straight line of the rules? Such and so great is the object of our longing zeal, and such a man should he be, who prepares and conducts souls to their espousals.
I will introduce the person for our next reflection. Cristina Lamas is the Executive Director for the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry. Previously, she served as Associate Director for the Office and Religious Education and Division Coordinator of Youth Ministry for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Cristina has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in social work from the University of Southern California. In her role with NFCYM, she is also a member of the core team for the National Dialogue on Catholic Pastoral Ministry with Youth and Young Adults, and collaborative initiative with several national organizations and the USCCB. Lately, she was the MC for the Quinto Encuentro.
Good afternoon, friends. Thank you for your invitation to join you this afternoon. Before the Blessed Sacrament, I stand before you as a friend in the Lord to share some thoughts that might aid you in your discernment and reflection today. And in that spirit, I'd like to begin with the prayer. Loving God, we begin this time with the words of St. Paul from his letter to the Romans. In the same way, the Spirit, too, comes to the aid of our weaknesses. For we do not know how to pray as we ought, but the Spirit itself intercedes with inexpressible groanings, and the one who searches hearts knows what is the intention of the Spirit, because it intercedes for the holy ones according to God's will. Loving God, you know our hearts. Guide this reflection with your Spirit and help us to be mindful of your presence among us. We ask this in the name of Jesus, our healer. Amen. Over the past several months since the crisis erupted, I've spent hours in daily prayer. I've had conversations with many different people and lay leaders across the nation, and simply listened. So I stand before you not as Christina, who works for the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry, but as a layperson who loves her faith, who loves her church, and who loves working for and with the young church, and who brings with her the voices of many others like me. I am grateful for the opportunity to share with you how the laity has been impacted by the current crisis, our needs, our hopes, and to name what we are seeking from our bishops. During the inaugural Mass at the recent Synod in Rome, Pope Francis called the bishops to broaden their horizons, expand their hearts, and to transform the frames of mind that today paralyze, separate, and alienate us from young people and the laity as a whole, leaving them exposed to stormy seas, orphans without a faith community that should sustain them, and orphans devoid of a sense of direction and meaning in life. He went on to say to the young people and others, he felt that the church was detached from their problems and an unattractive institution following the numerous corruptions and abuse scandals. And the only way to help the young is to look into their eyes, acknowledge their situation, and make every effort to curtail uncertainty, exclusion, and violence to which they are repeatedly exposed to. And I believe these words are very fitting for us today. I firmly believe that the Lord wants to renew all of us, his church, and move us from we've always done it this way to something new. I pray the next couple of minutes will offer you insight that you will carry over into the next couple of days, and ultimately lead to action that will give the laity a clear an indication that business as normal will not continue, that we, as one body, a body of bishops with the laity, have entered into a new era so that we can move as a church from where we are today to a new place of hope. I come to you as a single mother, raising a beautiful child with the desire for her to encounter Christ, to develop a profound love for her church. I hope that in 10, 20 years from today, she has a solid foundation and the strength to rely on her faith that is nurtured and sustained by the sacraments and a community that can guide her. Some of my most profound and transformative moments in my life have come from my own child. Those words that make you stop in your tracks and think, what kind of example? What am I doing? What am I giving my daughter? There is no doubt that the Spirit is present with me, will work with me, will work around me, and will even work without me. But am I living the life that my child can see Christ in me through my actions? I am a sinner, no doubt about that. I make mistakes. But does my daughter hear me say, I am sorry? Does she witness me correct my behavior? Do I authentically listen to her and understand her feelings? Do I include her in my decision-making process as a young but vital member of my family? When I tell her about the love of Christ and what Christ wants to do in her life, does it stir her heart? And in all these things, I say yes. Now, my role as a mother is not any different than what the laity need from their bishops as a spiritual father, to both the priest and to the laity. Our family is hurting. We want our bishops to rediscover their role as spiritual fathers to all of us, fathers who make amends, validate the feelings of all family members, from pain to frustration to embarrassment and so on. Yes, we need policies, but first, we need spiritual fathers who can protect, take responsibility, and recognize their faults. We want spiritual fathers who will say, I am sorry, and be bold to take the steps to provide a better future. Before I continue, I would like to invite you to a quick exercise with me. Perhaps it might be a little out of your comfort zone, but everything we are discussing here today is out of our comfort zone. So please join me. I invite you to close your eyes and to think back to that moment you knew in your heart that God was calling you to serve. We all have had that pivotal moment, a person, an experience, an action wherein we knew God was calling us. Go back to that moment and recall that feeling. Recall with whom you shared the news you were going to enter the seminary. Recall the feeling of saying yes to the Lord. Recall your first Mass. Recall the endless number of people Christ has left an imprint on you because of your work and your genuine desire to follow Christ. And recall what your journey has been thus far. Now, if you could describe your pivotal moment in one word, what would that be? If you could describe your pivotal moment in one word, what would that be? I invite you to open your eyes and turn to the person next to you and simply share that one word. Thank you. My word would be holiness, an understanding that the ultimate vocation is a baptismal call to holiness, that all those who answer God's call to holiness, regardless of their state of life or engagement with the church, are part of this community. In reflecting on that, what came to mind were the words of St. Oscar Romero that might also be helpful to you. He went on to say, "How beautiful will the day be when all the baptized understand that their work, their job, is a priestly work. That just as I celebrate Mass at this altar, so each carpenter celebrates Mass at his workbench, and each metal worker, and each professional, and each doctor with his scalpel, the market woman at the stand, is performing a priestly duty." How many cab drivers I know listen to this message in their cabs? You are a priest at the wheel, my friend, and if you work with honesty, consecrating that taxi of yours to God, bearing a message of peace and love to the passengers who ride in your cab. I do not believe that any person sitting in this room, as you recalled your pivotal moment and brought to mind the countless number of faces that you have ministered to and with over the years, signed up to face a clergy sex abuse and to continue to live it 16 years later. I believe your yes was rooted in Christ to serve a community and infuse the world with the gospel. This is our time to regain the spirituality of your role as a pastor, a shepherd, and a servant leader. The reading of St. Gregory of Nazianzus that Marilyn read serves as a great example of the spiritual value of a bishop. It speaks of the importance of the care of souls, how a bishop seeks not his own interest, but of those of his spiritual children, how he imitates Christ and lives not for himself, but for Christ and his preaching. Yet, here we are. Now, for us to move into a new era, a new place of healing and hope, we must begin by naming, as uncomfortable as it is, the root of the problem. A number of priests misused power to prey on vulnerable, and some bishops purposely and consciously moved predators around and kept it behind closed doors. The focus was on protecting the institution and taking care of clergy at the expense of laity. Whether this was intentional or not, or how decisions were made or not made, the reality is this is the worst form of clericalism. And this is how we as the faithful and society have perceived the situation. The following is what we hear from the media, whether true or not true. This is what's forming society. And it goes as follows. Following an examination of thousands of court records, media reports, and interviews with church officials, victims, and attorneys, the Boston Globe and Philadelphia Inquirer reported last week that more than 130 bishops have been accused during their careers of failing to adequately respond to sexual misconduct in their diocese. That's almost 1/3 of our living bishops. It was also reported that the claims against more than 50 bishops involve incidents that happened after the 2002 Dallas Charter. This has led to an outcry of feelings, emotions, and reactions from the laity for an immediate response of accountability and transparency. The laity is frustrated with the double standards. It is important to know that the Dallas Charter is working and effective, but it needs to be applied evenly for all people. The Charter excluded bishops, and the burden to enforce the Charter has been carried by the laity. Do you know that I can't walk into my child's classroom without first being fingerprinted and Virtus trained? I don't object to this because it keeps my daughter and the rest of the children safe. But does the same apply to you? We can't hold anyone to a higher standard due to their role. I know people who have been red flagged for years and who are not allowed back into the church, and no clear path has been set to welcome them back. I have listened to many lay leaders working in and for the church share their feelings of losing their jobs, expressing feelings of embarrassment and being disillusioned, having to defend their vocational choice to work with and in the church to their own spouses, families, and friends. At the same time, these lay leaders are not completely trusted by the very people who protected abusers. We are hurting. The church is bleeding, and a Band-Aid will not heal the wound. I invite you to join me in reading and naming the signs of our times. And my prayer for you is that you will consider these 7 specific needs that the laity is seeking from our bishops. Number 1, from you, our bishops, we need transparency and accountability. No more secrets. Secrets hold power. We need bishops who will share the oversight of sexual conduct and management of abuse cases with lay leadership, with proper reporting and collaboration with civil authorities. Number 2, from you, our bishops, we need more listening to laity. We seek the continuing practice of listening sessions, not just once, but ongoing, and to encourage priests to do the same. We need to create a culture of honest dialogue in the church, to acknowledge the failures, the sins, to communicate a path with concrete steps moving forward, and validate all feelings, and make it clear that we will not face this crisis again because we value the dignity of each person. Number 3, from you, our bishops, we need genuine care about the pastoral aspect of the church, not just policy, administration, legal, and financial matters. We need bishops who care about the laity in a particular way, the lay people who serve in the church alongside them, and continue to care for the sexual abuse victims and their families. Number 4, From you, our bishops, we need investment rooted in the love of people. We need bishops to acknowledge the costs that have been borne because of the abuse. In many cases, young people have been hurt twice. First, when they were abused, and secondly, when those ministries designated to serve them were eliminated to pay for abuse settlements. We hope history will not be repeated due to budget cuts as a result of this crisis. We need bishops to care through their investments to allocate or reallocate financial resources into churches' outreach and pastoral care, and in particular to those that are disaffiliated and those who have been hurt by the church. Number 5, from you, our bishops, we need prophets of hope and engagement in respectful dialogue with one another and with the laity, even with those who disagree with them and challenge them. We need models of unity, of openness, and prayerful patience, discernment, collegiality, and humility from our spiritual fathers. This means avoid polarized infighting, entrenching in one's ecclesial or political position, or cutting one another down, even in passive-aggressive ways. Number 6, from you, our bishops, we need words of compassion when speaking about those who have been disconnected from or hurt by the church, to view them as sisters and brothers, not as prized objects that we are seeking to repopulate the pews. We need bishops to stop seeing conspiracy and malice in those who disagree with or those who have been disengaged from us. Instead, we look for our bishops and those who work with them to assume the good in every person, regardless of their point of view. And finally, 7, from you, our bishops, we need to address the root of the problem, the abuse of power. We need church leaders who can do some real soul searching about clericalism and its roots, so that the church can make a clean break with all the abuses of power. We look to be co-workers in the vineyard of the Lord with you. We ask that you walk with us rather than ignore us. You are not just the spiritual fathers of the clergy. You are our spiritual fathers too. Over the past few months, we have experienced glimmers of hope. Many sitting in this room have opened the doors for files to be renewed. Many have established review boards to advise your work. Many have hosted listening sessions in their dioceses. People are still expressing a desire to serve in the church, to engage in their parish communities, and to go through RCIA. Youth and young adults are still connecting with the church through the work of your diocese and parish's pastoral efforts. I personally trained 14 young children to serve as altar servers this last month. Hope is present. As a result of the implementation of the Dallas Charter, we now see those horrendous and horrible acts of violence from the last century finally uncovered. New generations are now told not to keep secrets and that no person is above question or above the law. Thanks to your child protection efforts, we now receive the tools to effectively report the abuse of minors, and less people are in positions to harm because, for the most part, our pastoral leaders are keeping the vulnerable protected. This shows that despite darkness, hope is still present. Over the next couple of days, you will be discussing documents, standards of conduct for bishops, policies for retired bishops, and a new way forward presented by the National Review Board. This, and of itself, gives hope, even if there's no definite vote taking place at this meeting. The fact that you are devoting time to look at the problems and address what you need to do to get back to the foundations of ministry provides much needed hope. The fact that I'm here present, addressing you, gives me hope and the assurance that we are on the precipice of a holy moment. I pray that the time spent in prayer and discernment today and the days to come will lead toward a much-needed renewal. As you continue to discern your next steps, remember, the laity want to work with you. Trust us. Trust the experience and expertise of the laity, in particular, your lay staff and ministry leaders. We can handle the bad news. we're already doing some of the heavy lifting. We want to be seen and heard by you as our spiritual fathers, and to know that we too have a voice in God's kingdom. As was stated in the final document of the recent synod, the laity want to participate and share in the solution to ensure we do not face this issue again. And let us not also forget that no sin is too great for God's mercy and love. Healing is possible when it is authentically and humbly asked for in prayer. So armed with God's unfailing love and mercy, let us move together in reconsecrating ourselves to holiness and human dignity and enter a new era, a new place of hope, to authentically live the gospel. We are grateful for you and the gifts that you have been given by God to serve the church. We are praying with you and for you. I have a powerful image in my mind of the young people at the National Quinto Encuentro in Grapevine, who lovingly expressed their love to you in a ballroom, their desire to pray with and for you and to serve with you. In closing, I leave you with an image of God who loves to link people together, who brings the saints together. Take, for example, St. Francis and St. Clare. Here are two people who together entered a new era to rebuild the church, a new place of hope. Like Francis and Clare, the bishops and the laity are being linked to work together so that we can enter into a new era, a new place of hope for this generation and generations to come to rebuild the church. Everything in God is possible, even the seemingly impossible. I trust that God is at work in you today and at this very moment. So, will you take my hand, along with the hand of the religious sisters, the priest, the laity, the victims of abuse and their families, the young church, and promise to journey with me and the laity to make room at the table for our presence, our voice, our love, and gifts, so that together we can rebuild the church and bring about a new era and make our church a place for hope for all? And if so, I look forward to walking that road with you. Thank you.